want to introduce a woman who's been a colleague of mine for more than 10 years. Brilliant, brilliant voice. There are more than 2,500 stations, talk radio stations in the country. Only about 5 or 6 are progressive. And I don't know how many or how few there are that are black in orientation. And this young woman is a legend in radio. She's been in radio more than 10 years, a couple of decades. And you can depend upon her day in and day out on WVON, black-owned station, from 9 to 12 p.m., everybody. So go to WVON.com and tune into the Perry Small Show. Everybody, give this icon of radio, Perry Small, some love, everybody. You can do better than that.
I can't tell you what an honor it is to be here, and very quickly, because I know we're short on time. I started my career at Rainbow Push. If it weren't for the run for the presidency by Reverend Jackson, I wouldn't be here today. And Mr. Bill Garth, the late Mr. Bill Garth of Citizen News Group. And it's my honor to be here because I've come full circle. And I just wanted to say, this week I covered and talked about what was going on in Pembroke. But over close to 40 years ago, I traveled with Reverend Jackson to Tunica, Mississippi, to Sugar Ditch. One of the best articles I ever wrote. And Tunica, Pembroke, that's not right in these United States, is it not? It's not right. It is my pleasure to be here Women's Day, and we're going to have a Women's Justice panel, and we're going to have a presentation of women honorees today. And again, it's my pleasure to be here. Started my career. Reverend Jackson, when he was running for the Democratic nomination for President of the United States, I was just a little thing at that time. I weighed a lot less. I was a little wisp of a girl. And it was hard to get through all of these big news reporters and who had been seasoned, and they were white, and I was this little black girl, as Matt McGill used to call me. And Reverend Jackson would see me and he'd say, "Perry, I'll take your question." And that's what put me on the map, and I thank him for that. Thank you, Reverend. I do. And Rainbow Push into all of you. So let's get started. We're going to have this panel today. We have a lot to talk about. We have the Honorable Dorothy Brown, still clerk of the Circuit Court. We have the Honorable, is it Tanya Thomas, Hopkins Park Trustee, School District 259 Board Member. And we also have Kristen Pittman. She is the Push Comptroller. How are you? It's so nice to see you again. So we have a lot to talk about, and thank you so much for coming out, as you do every week, and listening to WVON and supporting our radio station. We appreciate you. So let's get started. How are you ladies today?
Just fantastic.
Don't they look lovely? So I'm going to start with you, Dorothy Brown. And I hate that this is probably one of the last times I'm going to probably talk to you, besides you coming on the show. I wanted to talk to you about pretrial detention because we're talking about social justice. What is pretrial detention?
Well, Perry, I want to first just recognize the ladies that are here to be honored today, especially those from the committee, the International Luncheon Committee, especially Dr. Donna League, who's our co-chairperson, of course, our chair, Mrs. Jackson, is to be honored for sure. And of course, the founding ladies that we're honoring today as well. But I know there's a couple of elected officials, too, that are here, Justice Cobbs, as well as Cam Dubuclet from the Water Reclamation Commissioner, and, of course, President Bobby Steele. But pretrial detention is exactly, what we did on Christmas Day, those two young men that were here this morning. And I was happy to see those two young men here because there were 4 young men that Reverend Jackson was able to get out, but only 2 came this morning. That's like the 10 virgins, those that came back, the lepers that came back to thank. All right. So, but I appreciate those young men coming back this morning. But pretrial detention is when a person is in custody because they've been arrested. Of course, they've been given a bond, but many of them cannot afford the bond, or sometimes relatives refuse to bail you out. And so as a result, you have to be detained. Of course, there is the Eighth Amendment says that a person cannot have an excessive bond. And we have been working with when I say we, I mean the public justice stakeholders, myself, Chief Judge Evans, the state's attorney and public defender. We've been working together to do criminal justice reform for a lot of years, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But pretrial detention is exactly what it is, detaining a person prior to their trials. And of course, as we talked about this morning, many people are in jail for a long period of time, sometimes up to 5 and 7 years.
So let me ask you this real quick. I hate to interrupt you. There was a recent story where a man had been in prison for years. I mean, not in prison, in the Cook County Jail for years. How does that happen?
Well, sometimes there's no bail. A person can get no bail because he or she has a really, really violent crime, and therefore the judge will give them no bail. And if you have no bail, then you don't get out until that case is over. Now, of course, cases go a long time for various and sundry reasons.
I'm talking, but this was like decades.
Oh, decades. Now, I'm not familiar with
this gentleman that was recently released. He had been in Cook County Jail, I think, for at least 20 years. How do you stay in Cook County Jail for all those years?
There are various sundry reasons for a person staying in for a long time, but I'm not familiar with that particular case. I don't know if we have anybody that's been in for 20 years, but if there is a person of that nature, then it has a lot to do with his or her attorney and probably what occurred, and of course the trial in which that person, how that case proceeded in court.
All right. Well, go ahead. Continue with what you were saying.
But pretrial detention, the problem is that, and there's been a lot of work on bail bond reform to keep people from having to be in jail because of the fact that they cannot afford to pay. People are supposed to, we have something called a public safety assessment that is done for each person. And we have a pretrial services department that actually interviews each person, determine, first of all, if they have somewhere to go, determine what the crime they have committed actually is, how violent is that crime, what is your particular age, do you have any prior crimes that you've committed and have been convicted to? Did you fail to appear in court the last time or some of the last times? So all of those things go into effect, and then there is a risk assessment done to determine whether or not you will indeed appear in court, you will indeed possibly reoffend. Now, there was a study done back in 1992 by the Illinois Criminal Justice Authority, and back in that time, at least 54% of the people were not coming back to court. And about 56% of them were actually recommitting. Well, since we have been having this bail bond reform panel that we put together, we have found that over 83% of the people are coming back to court, and over 83% of them are not recommitting crimes. So it's actually working. Now, we have a lot more work to do. When we, of course, let people go for either because you have a low bond on bail on them and they are able to get out, or you let them out on their own recognizance. A lot of times people think there's a public safety risk. Well, we have to put wraparound services around them to make sure that we're supporting them while they're out. And Cook County right now has actually requested a grant, and the Cook County Board has allocated a certain amount of funds to help put those kind of wraparound services around them.
Aren't we going to miss Dorothy Brown? Can we congratulate her on her retirement? So how can this law be amended so that it is more fair?
Well, there have been a lot of things that have occurred already, I think, that's been very helpful. For instance, you can get $30 per day credit towards your bail. So as a matter of fact, the longer you're in, depending on what your bail is, you can actually be let go because you got $30 per day credit for the time that you're in jail. So that was something that was put in place. And of course, there is a presumption of innocence. Chief Judge Evans issued the court order saying that there has to be a presumption of innocence, and to the extent, and you also have to consider a person's ability to pay. So I think a lot has already been done, but we have to work together. Many not-for-profit agencies are actually putting their funds together, like Rainbow Push Coalition, and helping people to actually bail themselves out. So I think it's left up to us now, and it's in the judge's discretion. But Chief Judge Evans is paying a lot of attention. We have something called a dashboard. You can go on his website, Circuit Court of Cook County, and you can actually see exactly the rate in which people are being released, where he's really holding judges accountable so that people are not actually given high bonds inequitably.
All right. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, Dorothy Brown, Clerk of the Circuit Court of Cook County. And now I would like to introduce you to the District 259 member, Hopkins Park trustee, Honorable Tanya Thomas. How are you today?
I'm fine.
Thank you so much. Let me just say this. As I was saying when I came on, I can't believe that I'm dealing with an issue like Pembroke today after over 30 years of dealing with Sugar Ditch in Tunica, Mississippi. It's a disgrace. And thank you for your service. I want to appreciate you for that.
You're welcome.
What are the percentage of women who actually live in Pembroke? And I'm sorry, for those of you who don't know, Pembroke is a district in Kankakee where they don't have internet service, they don't have access to gas, and that they don't have access to gas, which really doesn't make a lot of sense to a lot of us. We think of these as like, just basic rights. And there are children that are living in poverty, and I actually worked with a young lady who was an assistant to my boss, Melody Span Cooper, who lived in that area. And when she talked to me about the extent of the poverty that she lived in, it just, I didn't understand it. And then when Reverend Jackson brought this to the forefront, it kind of all came together. So thank you again, Ms. Thomas, for joining us today. Tell me about a little bit about the conditions. What are the percentage of women that actually live in Pembroke?
Okay, first I would like to start off by introducing our mayor of the Village of Hopkins Park, Mark Hodge.
Hey.
So to give you a little background about Pembroke, I am a board member for District 259, Lorenzo R. Smith School. I'm also a village trustee. I'm also president of the Ladies of Pembroke Book Club and vice president of our Juneteenth Council.
Okay, to make me feel really bad about myself. Okay, go right ahead.
But to start off about Pembroke, there is internet, but because we're a rural area, every part of Pembroke does not have.
Right.
So our students in our district, they do have iPads, but they cannot take those iPads home because they do not have internet.
Wow.
In some areas of our community. Our community is a working class area. So everyone, they go to work, they go to school, it's life. However, somewhere along the line, somebody forgot about Illinois and this gas line, forgot about Pembroke. And if we get this gas line, that will bring a better situation to our community. I don't want to call our community impoverished or poverty, below poverty level. I always tell our community, we need a hand up. We're not looking for a hand out.
Right.
That's not what we want.
Right.
As far as the women in Pembroke, there's about 65%, 70% women.
Okay. And what are some of the inequities that women actually face when it comes to living in Pembroke? I mean, first of all, for those who don't know, if you don't have a gas line, you use things like propane, right?
Yes.
So that's a big issue, which
Yes.
is I don't know, is that costly? Is propane more costly than it is to have natural gas?
Yes, it is. Propane is about $2.39 a gallon. So to get about 300 gallons, that's about $788. That will only last you about a month and a half, and that depends on how well insulated your house is. Whereas if you get Nicor gas or a natural gas, that's cheaper.
So what are the challenges for these single moms and who are raising these families? What are the challenges with having that cost as well as just the basic needs of their families?
Well, some of the challenges would be transportation.
Okay.
The nearest store, let's say you wake up in the middle of the night and you realize your child has a fever, and of course you need Tylenol or Motrin. You have to drive about 30 minutes to get to the nearest store to purchase that medication. As far as the propane gas, if I have a choice to pay $788 for gas or $800 for rent for the month, that's a tough decision. Because if I buy gas, I may not have a place to live. If I have a place to live, then my babies will be cold.
Reverend?
People in Pembroke have a kind of complex. They are rich people, poor conditions.
Yes.
They have a kind of complex. I live in Pembroke. Many of them moved to Chicago and leave valuable property. They came this area looking for land. They own acres of land. Without natural gas, they cannot attract business to develop. You cannot build an institution of propane gas these days, so they cannot get jobs or contracts. And so when they leave the land, somebody takes the land at a cheap price. We're going to Kankakee tomorrow at the Morning Star Church. Meet with Kankakee officials and Mayor Hodge from Hopkins Park. We're not going to stop until we get natural gas, internet, and high Wi-Fi for all the people who live there.
Yeah. Do you have a racial breakdown of Pembroke? I mean, first of all, how many people actually live in the Pembroke community, and can you give me a racial breakdown of that community?
In our community, we have about 75% African American, about 25% Latino or Caucasian.
And how many residents in Pembroke about?
The census, probably about 3,000.
About 3,000.
Yes.
And what industries are located near Pembroke? Where do people go to find work in Pembroke?
The neighboring community is Moment, so we have different factories.
Okay.
Or Kankakee. As for myself, I work for medical foundation. So
the last question is, what did it mean for Rainbow Push and Reverend Jackson to put this issue in the forefront? What did it mean to Pembroke?
As Reverend said, it means jobs. One of the biggest challenges is jobs. So you have to drive about 30 minutes to find a good paying job. It would mean, for our district, it would mean bringing families back to our community. Our district, when I was a student there, we had over 1,500 students. We have less than 300 right now.
In the entire district?
Yes, that's pre-K through 8th.
Wow.
Our high schoolers are bused to a neighboring community. for high school, about 12 minutes away.
Can we get another round of applause for of course, the Honorable Tanya Thomas and Reverend Jackson for bringing this to the forefront. Thank you so much. I appreciate
Many of
it.
them are living in trailers without no toilets. In the wintertime, it's cold, and they work 30 minutes away from where they live, so if they don't have the transportation to get there. And so we were out there last week, and there's a railroad track. On this side of the railroad track, there are 3 houses owned by white people. They are connected to the gas line. Across the track, there's no pipe.
Wow.
Yeah.
Along the railroad track, there are 3 families. They're white, and they have connection to a gas line. And across the tracks, well, that puts okay. Okay. You know, rarely I am speechless and without speech. I am without speech on that one.
Dr. King's last effort was to work on the post campaign. If you have a size 10 foot and a size 8 shoe, this is structural racism. Every other town has natural gas and Wi-Fi, except Pembroke. These farmers left the South, left Mississippi, Arkansas, to come to farm.
Right.
But they can't get feed, nor seed, nor money, nor develop, nor grow. We intend to break that. We intend to change that. NICO gas, People's Gas, all of us working together.
Well, thank you again, Reverend Jackson, and of course, the Honorable Tanya Thomas. I'm going to have you on my show real soon. I look forward to it. I now want to introduce you, well, you all know her, Kristen Pittman. She is the push comptroller. Hi, Kristen, how are you?
Hello, how are you doing?
Do you ever age?
Yes,
You
I
look the
do.
same today as you did 10, 15 years ago.
That
How
would be
are
my
you?
mother. She had the same position at Rainbow Push.
Oh wow,
Yes,
that is
absolutely.
awesome. So let's talk a little bit as we're talking about this is Women's Day here at Rainbow Push. I just wanted to remind you. We're talking about student loans, and thank God I came up in the